We see clients all the time using Claude or ChatGPT to be their outsourced insurance advisor.
Fascinating.
With all due respect to my friend Claude, doesn't know anything about insurance yet. They come in with conviction that they've got all this authority over it, and then it's actually a real client management challenge to then coach them around, hey, actually, these are the real answers.
Welcome to Context Window, AI, Insurance, and the Humans Behind It, podcast about what's actually working at the intersection of AI and insurance. I'm your host, Kyle Nakasuji, founder of ClearCover and Dearborn Labs. Each episode, I sit down with the operators, builders, and executives who are deploying AI inside real insurance companies and get to the real story behind the decisions, the trade-offs, and the hard-won lessons. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with a longtime friend of mine, probably longer than he'd like to admit, Travis Hedge, co-founder and CEO of Vouch Insurance, the AI-enabled insurance brokerage for ambitious companies, serving more than 6,000 clients from incorporation through IPO. Travis, welcome to the show.
Kyle, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, we were much younger men there back in the day.
Well, we'll jump right into it. I want to hear your story, but I think we met maybe just 12 or 13 years ago. I was like this freshly minted venture capitalist, and you were working at SVB at the time, which I'm sure we'll hear about. And we met at there's some like duck bar in.
Oh gosh, it's killing me. It was right off El Camino there. It was a classic. I went there all the time.
You
Wood
invited
panels,
me.
deviled eggs. Yeah,
dark, like wood panels. That's some duck theme to it. But anyways, like I was so starstruck. You're like this big time VC, Silicon Valley. I was this kid coming out from Wisconsin, and so thank you for taking me under your wing so early. Wing appropriately in the duck bar. I learned a lot from you.
Of course, I felt the same way. It's funny how that works.
Good. Well, you shouldn't have. All right. So, Travis, we want to get deep into your story and how you got to this place where you're running this amazing company, Vouch. So, give us the 30,000 foot view of you and Vouch, and then we'll go back in time to the very beginning.
Yeah. So today, as you said, Vouch is an AI-enabled insurance broker. We serve over 6,000 clients. We start off with a focus on venture-backed companies. So think early-stage companies, and then scale with them as they grow. So over the last couple of years, we now serve companies through IPO, and we can talk about what all that entails. We've also expanded other categories, right? So we serve venture capital firms themselves, and that allowed us to start serving hedge funds and asset managers and other kinds of professional services. And so, yeah, it's been a really fun ride, but I can't believe it's been almost 8 years now.
All right, let's go back further than 8 years. So where'd you grow up?
So grew up in Columbus, Ohio. My parents had a small agency that was our family business growing up. So dinner table was the boardroom. I remember a Thanksgiving dinner one time where my grandmother worked at Nationwide. My dad got all upset because they had bought Allied, and he's like, "You're going to ruin it." So anyways, I grew up around the business. And
what was that? What was that like? So, like, at what age were you listening to insurance conversations at the dinner table?
Well, I could tell you, I usually have this, but we actually just moved, and it's somewhere in a moving box right now. My third grade career day report, where I'm wearing a sweater vest that says, "I want to be an insurance agent." So it goes back pretty far.
They made sweater vests that say, "I want to be an insurance agent."
Well, no, I had the cover said, "I want to be an insurance agent."
Thank goodness. Okay, great. Somebody at Oshkosh B'gosh was going to have to get a new job if they were making sweater vests for kids that say, "I want to be an insurance agent."
I mean, that would have been pretty sweet, but yeah, that would have been the late 90s. And then Jim Tressel came along and really popularized the sweater vest here in Ohio. That's a deep cut for those that also follow football.
He did. All right. So third grade, you loved sweater vests and decided that you wanted to be an insurance agent.
Yeah. Look, I just had a lot of respect for my dad. He, both my parents had, neither of them graduated from college, and this small business really allowed us so much opportunity in life. My dad reminded me all the time how he, grew up, as he told it, with dirt floors, walking uphill to school every day, right? The whole 9 yards. But constantly reminded me how lucky I was to just have opportunity thanks to a small business and the small businesses that he was supporting as an insurance agent. They primarily evolved into doing mostly employee benefits and payroll. They stopped doing P&C a long time ago, but I was really passionate about entrepreneurship, and was like going door to door selling payroll for them and doing all that kind of stuff, and like shredding paper in the basement, getting paid by the bag kind of thing. But it was again, I was really passionate about entrepreneurship. That ended up leading actually to I spent some time in politics and built like a bipartisan political platform. And I was 18, so you can imagine why that didn't work out for a whole host of reasons. But ended up licking my wounds and realizing like, all right, if I actually want to be a proper entrepreneur someday, I got to go learn some things. And so ended up at Nationwide Insurance. That they had a rotational program there where I was really fortunate to meet a guy named David Verbance that took me under his wing, and we ended up building out the very early Nationwide Ventures team. And then the first investment we made was into SVB Capital, their fund that was mostly doing like Series A to Series C, but like Series B, fintech, digital health, that kind of stuff. And they had an opening on their team, and I threw my hat in the ring and got really fortunate, and spent the first 6 months really excited about all the shiny objects moving to Silicon Valley for the first time. Like drones and AR, VR were like all the rage at the time. And about 6 months in, I was like, first of all, like I'm not going to get a deal done doing that stuff. And I was like, that insurance thing I spent my whole life around is still pretty broken. And I called an old friend of mine who was like the smartest person I knew at Nationwide, this guy Alex Tim, and he was starting Root Insurance. And one thing led to another. We ended up co-leading their Series B with Ribbit Capital. I think that was around the time I met you, and this was obviously pre-clear cover. And so this was back, I think when we called it, like we had these dinners, the insurance technology dinners, before InsurTech was really a phrase. And one thing led to another.
So okay, so this is great material. So you're in third grade. You're working for your parents. Tell me about their business. Was it easy for them? Was it hard for them? Like, did you get a sense of like the difficulty of entrepreneurship through
Oh
watching
yeah.
your Oh yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember again, like the dinner table was where I got to overhear a lot of these conversations, right? And my parents were talking about even just basic business stuff like managing people, right? And like the difference between the people that you have to encourage to take vacation and the people that you have to encourage to take less vacation, and like just how you create kind of culture in a business. So there was all that kind of thing. And then I think I remember really clearly, I think it was after like a little league baseball game, and this would have been around that third grade time period. The internet was really becoming a thing, right? And my dad was getting all excited about it. He was a pretty innovative and like entrepreneurial guy, and he saw an opportunity to buy a payroll business and like bring a lot of his business online and create better, at the time, better digital experiences for his clients. In the way that a small agency in Columbus could, right? This wasn't a venture backed business. Um, but yeah, we were spending a lot of time on those sorts of ideas, and I was really fortunate to just kind of like get to hang around the hoop. And that's where around he decided to go all in on that and really stop doing PNC. My cousin started doing PNC with his own agency, and they'd send referrals. I love it. I saw him last summer, and he's got all these license plates that say like quote it, bind it. So it really like runs in the business, runs in the family. Um,
We're gonna have some great. If anybody out there wants to get into like the insurance swag business, the first 8 minutes of this podcast have been just chock full of ideas of sweater vests and bumper stickers, and like we got a side hustle, I think,
we could
burgeoning
vibe
here.
code this right now. Yeah.
We could, yeah, that's true. That's a great use of tokens, I think, to make really cutting edge insurance swag.
Yeah.
How does one go from having insurance boardroom conversations around the dinner table to building a platform for bipartisan political engagement?
So the other thing my dad was really passionate about was politics, and so that kind of also got in my blood at the time. And my high school was we had this really interesting program where you could get out of school early for this like internship program, and so I started doing that, and I got connected to some folks down at the state house and started spending some time down there. And then Ohio State also had this program where they'd pick like 10 kids locally here in Columbus and put them through this program at the Glenn School of Public Affairs. And like John Glenn and his wife would come and talk to you. It was really cool.
Hmm.
They connected me with Pat Teaberry. He was our congressman at the time. And I got to go work with him. And then eventually his office made me an offer to join them full time, kind of senior year of high school, going into college. And so I had a choice to make. Like, all right, I spent my whole life thinking I'm gonna go anywhere else but Ohio State for school. I love it, but I wanted to like get out of Columbus. But I just had some great opportunities to be here locally and do some cool stuff. So ended up doing that. And then John Kasich, who would go on to become governor, used to be the congressman in that seat. And so he came into the office one day, and he and his team were like, "Hey, we need like a young intern to come like help us get this thing going." And they're like, "You guys should talk to Travis." And so I got to be the first intern on his campaign, and that was a really cool experience. And he asked me to go build a youth coalition. And so I went around talking to some folks and realized, like, all right, the people that do the youth coalition thing typically are like already in the back. This is about firing up the base. That's not what I was interested in. And the people there, I had a lot of friends and people I got to know through this that like were really passionate about specific issues, but didn't care about one party or the other. Like so many Americans, they want something that's more independent, more in the middle.
Yeah.
So pitched Governor Kasich and his team on doing a bipartisan platform that kind of gamified it for young people that said, all right, if you've got a specific issue you care about, for me, that was entrepreneurship. For other people, that was social issues, like whatever. Find candidates that support those issues and then go make phone calls, knock doors, do the grassroots stuff that helps get those folks elected. And you earn points for doing it. And then, you get those points can be, cashed in for, you get lunch with your favorite candidate or, whatever that looks like. Was very fortunate that his team was supportive. And, eventually when it came time, two things I ran into. One, my eyes were much bigger than my stomach to actually go execute on this.
That's
Meaning,
a feature, not a bug in entrepreneurship, but keep going.
well, yeah, scope. I was Captain Scope Creep. I'll put it that way. I'm just like,
no.
tried to do way too much. And then, but also like the people that wanted to, give us money to go do this really only wanted us to support one party. And that was kind of antithetical to the vision. And at the time, I didn't really know much about like venture capital or Silicon Valley. And so went down that path for about a year, ultimately pulled the plug on it, contemplated for a minute, pivoting it into just purely like an entrepreneurship enablement platform. But I was like, you know what? I'm like at this point about to be 19, I think. And I was like, I'm in college. Why don't I actually just go do some college stuff and like figure out how to be a real entrepreneur. I'd also just gotten very disillusioned with politics. Like it became clear to me that this was around when Bloomberg was doing his thing. And it became clear, like, if you really want to have an impact on the world, you probably need to go build a business and make a bunch of money and then use that to go actually, do some cool things. So
interesting.
Yeah. So pulled the plug on that and decided let's go actually get some real business experience and do something with it.
It was like Pokemon Go for politics. You were way before your time. Does it exist now? Like has the idea manifested in reality since you came up with it?
I think some people have taken some runs at doing similar things. But I still think there's a big opportunity. Look, as we go make Vouch a massive business and create some liquidity for folks someday, would love to go solve those problems. I think the solution probably looks a little bit different today. But yeah, it's still an opportunity.
Awesome. All right. So now you're in school. What did you study?
So I studied finance and operations with a minor in entrepreneurship. And I chose that because those were my weaknesses, which, made going to class every day really excruciatingly boring. But yeah, so studied finance.
How did you know they were your weaknesses? Like I feel like you were 19.
Yeah.
Like as a 19-year-old, I clearly did not have any weaknesses whatsoever. Like that's pretty self-aware as a 19-year-old to be like, this is the stuff I'm not so good at.
Well, look, I had the politics thing wasn't my first run at starting a business. I had like done some landscape stuff and done I tried to start this like DVD business in high school to like film my little brother's like little league football games and then like sell highlight DVDs back to the families.
Nice.
And yeah, I realized that I had really big ideas, but actually executing on them was where the magic happens. And so finance and operations as my two majors seemed like the most execution oriented things I could do. In hindsight, I really wish I would have studied something like engineering, to be honest, but that hadn't even crossed my mind at the time.
Well, we can get into later how that might have served you the last decade versus the next one. But I understand the sentiment, certainly. All right. And then Nationwide. How did you end up at Nationwide?
So I remember going to the career fair. I guess this would have been after my sophomore year or something like that. And, give my resume to folks. And they were like, yeah, you've done some cool stuff, but like, how is this applicable to operations at Unilever. I was like, just give me a chance. So I ended up doing this like 6-month co-op at Unilever where I got to run inventory logistics for a deodorant plant, which was an interesting experience. And then after that, did an internship at Nationwide the next summer. They had this financial leadership rotational program thing with
Okay.
like an internship feeder program, and got to work. They had just bought a carrier called Harleysville, so I got to work on that integration. That was a really cool experience. And I later found out, so I was going through a whole bunch of stuff in my family and personal life that summer that, we can get into another time. But I found out I barely got the full-time offer to stay on from the internship. And actually I found out later that I had some friends like Alex Tim from Root who were like advocating for me in the room. Otherwise I don't know if I would have gotten it. So very
Wow.
grateful for that. Ended up getting the full-time offer at Nationwide, but because I'd done that co-op, I was starting off cycle. So I started in January, which means I got like the very worst rotation, which was internal audit. Um, I also, I mean, frankly, I also wanted to do an extra semester because it was Urban Meyer's first season as coach at Ohio State. So like
Sure.
wanted to get some tickets. Um, but
Spoken like a true Ohio State fan.
that's right.
But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, did the internal audit thing, and you had to go pitch like leaders of each team to like bring you into their rotation. So you'd go get coffee with all these people, and it was a whole thing. And while that was happening, my wife, she was at Miami of Ohio. My now wife was at Miami of Ohio, and they had a new program at the time where you could go spend a semester living in Silicon Valley working for a startup. And so she
Wow.
was working for a YC company at the time, which funny enough is now a Vouch client. So like comes very full circle. And I would go stay with her. And then I had a good friend from college named Andy Sparks, who was also out in Silicon Valley. He'd go on to start a company called Mattermark and do some other stuff. But he, I was just calling him because I was thinking about like, hey, I think Nationwide should have this like corporate venture thing. I was also pitching him on a Bitcoin business at the time, but that's a different story. And um, so anyways, I put this little deck together that was like Nationwide should have a ventures strategy.
Yeah.
And I met with, I don't know, 20 something senior leaders. And they're like, that's a nice kid, but like, do you want to come do FP&A? And was
How
very
did you
fortunate.
arrive at the conclusion they needed a venture strategy?
A couple things. One, just I thought there was an opportunity to be more innovative, right? Like I was sitting there in internal audit, just like seeing how the business worked, and at the same time, like had this experience with my dad, where he was a very innovative entrepreneur, and I was like just connecting some of those dots.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also at the time, some of the corporations in Cincinnati had really pulled together to create some interesting stuff. They had this like centrifuge thing, and I thought were a step ahead of some of the major corporations in Columbus, which I was pretty passionate about, and so use that as a reference point, like, hey, other companies are doing this, I think you guys need to get in the game. Came to find out that like many companies, they had done some stuff in the late 90s, lost their shirt, pulled
Yeah.
back, right? And so David Verbance was leading the private equity team, right? As I'm sure this audience knows, like Nationwide, like any insurance company, has a lot of float to invest. A big chunk of that was going to private equity. And so the idea was, let's carve some of that out for venture capital and put a little bit of a strategic angle on it, go get to work. So I met with David, and he was like, I've been looking for somebody like you to go do this with. Let's go. And was fortunate to have him pull me into the team, and we put a whole analysis together to convince the CIO to give us an allocation, and then we got to work doing due diligence. And the idea was initially to write some LP checks, learn a little bit, and then eventually build out a direct strategy.
That it's so much smarter than how we did it. Apologies to Dan if he happens to be listening to this. But I showed up at, there are parallels for sure, but I showed up at American Family in end of 2012, early 2013. And there was a very visionary chief investment officer, EVP strategy at the time, Peter Gunder. Maybe Peter will come on the pod someday. And Peter had a sort of pool of capital that they wanted to deploy strategically. We made a similar proposal, like you should spin up a venture fund, but mine was entirely self-serving. Like I just wanted to do venture, and this was a vehicle to do it. And so like we made this like sort of rationalized proposal of like why, and it does make sense on paper, but I didn't have nearly the foresight you did. It was more like, well, look, I showed up on my first day. at a cube with a Bloomberg terminal in it, and I don't know how to use
You
that.
had a Bloomberg terminal,
I
dude.
did, I know, but I never used it because I was like, I can't. Where's the space bar? Like I just couldn't figure it out. So uh, they took the Bloomberg terminal away. We swapped it for a proposal on why they should do venture capital, but it was not nearly this thoughtful. And we didn't start. We started by writing really small primary checks, and as
Mhm.
you say it, like which was fine. Like we got the motion down, and we ended up learning a bunch that way. But doing fund investments is a very thoughtful way to go about learning the business of venture, because I'm sure you partner with SVB. It sounds like,
Yep.
which was had a great run. And so like I assume that was it sounds to me like a much smarter way to learn how to
Well,
run
it's
that
so funny.
business
You and
than
I
I
have been
had.
moving in parallels for basically our entire careers. I remember having so much respect for how you guys are. Yeah, it felt to me, and let's be clear, like part of my motivation was I just wanted to do venture too, right? Um, you guys, I was a little jealous that you guys were doing more creative, innovative stuff at the time while I'm sitting here writing LP checks. So, that's just how it works. But I
uh,
remember you might enjoy this part. Like, I remember at the time, everybody on the investment floor there was reading a book. This time is different or something like that, right? About
mhm.
like investment cycles. So the first thing they had me do was run an analysis on the venture asset class and how it performed across different cycles. And this like for folks that know venture, this is now just like old hat, obvious stuff. But it was really enlightening to me at the time that for relative to every other asset class, venture underperforms at the median, at the bottom quartile. It only outperforms barely at the top quartile, but particularly the top decile. Right. And so the whole thing was like, all right, we got to go be in the top decile funds and opportunities if we actually want to make a return. And that was the mandate, like returns first, strategic second.
It's it was a conversation we had frequently as venture investors at an insurance company, was this notion of like the power law in terms of returns and what deals you have to be in order to make any money. And by the way, these analyses for the audience, like they used to be harder to do. Like this
Yeah.
pre Claude, you had to actually like go and do the work to figure this stuff out. And it was also the age of like Brad Feld's blog, Fred Wilson's
Yep.
blog. There was like some information, but not NVCA published. But it took a bit more work to pull together these analyses that now are just a prompt into whatever tool you're using.
Yep.
But same debate. Like uh, it was a business of cumulative advantage. And so like our goal was to say, how do we get involved in the best of the best stuff? Because that's where all the money flows, and that's where all the money then goes. And it was hard. It's as like a strategic investor, that can be difficult to do. But both firms have done really well. So like I think it's in some level they've pulled it off. The the SVB transition. So now talk to me about, you go from being a fund investor
Yep.
in SVB Capital.
Yep. So I remember we go out to Sand Hill Road. It was me, David, and this guy Tony Tanner, who also a great mentor. He now runs one of the big pension funds here in Ohio. Um, and first of all, they had me drive, which I now like driving around Sand Hill in California. I was like totally overwhelmed. Like, what is going on? Um, but I remember we met with Redpoint, which is now an investor in Vouch, and
Mhm.
Lightspeed, and a lot of the bigger names, and then SVB Capital. And we're doing on-site due diligence at SVB Capital. And funny enough, we got involved with them because we got an email from Bo Lasky, who big Michigan guy. So he and I have always had that kind of dynamic going on. Um, and yeah, so we're looking at their third direct fund, and we go to do on-site due diligence. They had a great strategy, like very data driven. They're partnering with the bank where they're doing a bunch of banking and debt deals, right? And had great data and great relationships to go find opportunities, and then often like co-investing alongside these other kind of tier one firms. And so, anyways, I remember we're in their kind of boardroom on Sand Hill Road, and in this like multi-hour meeting, and we walk out. And my boss looks at me. He's like, they've got an analyst opening on their team, right? I was like, yeah, I might have noticed. He's
No.
like, what? And he's like, you should really throw your hat in the ring. Like, I know it's what you want to do. And so, I mean, just like to have his support like that was
That's
huge.
amazing.
Like that, most folks wouldn't do that. So yeah, one thing led to another. I got to be an analyst there. And funny enough, I typically don't tell this part of the story, but like uh, Andy Sparks, my friend, had just started Mattermark, and I talked to him about potentially going and doing sales, and I would have like made more money on the surface doing that, but really wanted to be in venture, and like I felt like it was a really good opportunity to just go learn, and that's what it was. Like one of the many benefits of working there was we were doing both direct investing, we're also doing some fund investing, and it was a small team, so like I got to go raise money from LPs, and it was I got exposure to a lot, and it was really cool. Um, and so, but I remember first few months there, they were like, so your job is to sit behind a desk and like analyze numbers and put together investment memos. And I was like, but can I, like, if I source some deals in my own time, is that cool? And they were like, whatever, kid, but like, you're not going to have time. Uh, and so, and they kept trying to have to like rein me in. Um, and so when entrepreneurs from Ohio would go out to raise money in Silicon Valley, I ended up just being like their shoulder to cry on, like, let's go get a beer. And so that led to first investing in a company called Crosschecks. We want to become Olive. And then I was like, all right, well, they're not going to let me do another Ohio deal. And so when the whole root thing came about, I was like, all right, if we're gonna do this, I've got to go get like a super legit tier one firm involved to
Mm-hmm.
like let that do the talking for me. And so I introduced Alex to all the like fintech investors I knew at the time. And then I remember he told me, he's like, hey, I think we're gonna go raise a Series B in a few months. And I was like, oh, well, who'd you like? He's like, Nick Shalick, Ribbit Capital. Cool. So I went golfing with Nick. I was like, hey, I think we should go out to Columbus and like go see these guys.
Is Nick a good golfer? I didn't know he plays. I knew he was a hockey player. Does he play good
I
golf?
mean, because he's got the hand-eye. He's sneakily a good athlete. Yeah, of
Okay.
course. Honestly, the guy's good at everything. So like,
He
I'm not
don't that doesn't
surprised.
shock me. He's good at everything.
Yeah. And but I knew Nick was a hockey player, so like we went to a Blue Jackets game with Alex and Dan, and like did the whole thing. Ended up co-leading their Series B, and I got to go back. I got to go back to Columbus for board meetings once a quarter with Nick, and that's in part kind of how the idea for Vouch came about. But yeah, I'll pause there.
What did you love about that deal? I mean, obviously, I followed that company more closely than many because we were in the same space for a while, and
Yeah,
they've it's turned into an amazing business. And Alex is a tremendous entrepreneur. But like it was early still at the B. Like we were tracking it, and like
super early.
it was early. There
Yeah,
was still evidence to be gathered as to the certainty around that business's success. So like, what did you see in
hundred
it? What did
percent.
you love about it?
I mean, look, first of all, let's be clear. Like, I was a very young, excitable guy at the time. So, like, I didn't know what I didn't know at the time in a lot of
Mm.
ways. I liked Alex, right? Like, he just had this. He was, first of all, super smart, knew the business really well, came from it. His dad was a very successful insurance entrepreneur, um, but just operated with a level of pace and intensity that I
Mm.
didn't often see with other entrepreneurs I was talking to, and was very data driven. He did something very smart. I'd encourage all entrepreneurs to do, especially in a consumer business like this where you have real data and momentum to report on every week. He added me to their investor email, and every week I'm getting these updates of like numbers going up and up to the right. And then spent more time with other folks in the team. I had other friends that were working there at the time, so I just had a lot of conviction in the team and like the progress. And then I think from a thesis perspective, at the time I was a big believer in. Well, look, we'll talk more about this, but there's a spectrum in insurance between consumer, like, auto is probably, you know better than I do, but like the most commoditized like insurance product. Other end of the spectrum is some of the stuff that we do at Vouch today. We'll talk more about that. So the opportunity for direct distribution, right? Others had already proven that out with Geico and Progressive and others. And at the time, the whole narrative was around like the telematics in the phone. So you just saw
Yeah.
these sort of like trend lines emerging, and look, I drank the Kool-Aid and it all made sense.
Who believed first? You or Nick?
Well, Nick is inherently more skeptical than I am, so I guess it would have to be me.
Yeah.
I also introduced him to Alex, so I guess I believe first. But once Nick believes, he is like the best possible partner you can ask for.
Yeah.
Just
He's
ride or
great.
die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great investor. Amazing track record. All right. So then take us from SVB to Vouch.
Yeah. So let's see. I mentioned before there was a really lean team, and I got a ton of like just crazy, crazy opportunities while I was there. So I was at SVB Capital for like 5 years. And in that time period, so we did, a few other, made a few other investments. Um, they ended up asking me to lead a couple of the fundraising process. Like the head of IR was out on maternity leave. And they're like, Travis, go raise this $1 billion fund. Like, no
Got
big
it.
deal. So I got to raise over $1 billion in capital. That was a cool experience.
Amazing.
And I remember, so Nick and I were, going back for these board meetings, and we just kept talking like, hey, is there a similar opportunity happening in commercial right now? I mean, is that really that surface level at first of like, where are there opportunities in commercial insurance? And every quarter we'd get together and be like, have you seen it yet? No, not really. Like, we're tracking a couple companies, but they're taking a different approach. Like, haven't seen this model really for commercial insurance yet. And so at the same time, a few things happened. One, very early in my tenure at SVB Capital, my parents' agency got hacked, and that was a really trying like 3 years of
Hmm.
going through this litigation. I mean, there were moments where I thought we were going to lose it all, and fortunately, came through that totally fine, and like they're doing great today. But you know, they're a small company of 20 people that had like one IT guy doing laptops, and so it got me thinking a lot about the opportunity for carriers to work directly with their insureds to like prevent bad things from happening in the first
Hmm.
place, but also like then having the right cyber coverage as the second line of defense. So that was thing number one. Thing number two, um, got to see the companies we're working with directly, in the insurance that they were dealing with. And I'd have them send me like their PDF, 30-page cyber PDF applications. They're like asking all these nonsense questions. And, you see where the coverage itself isn't really designed for, I'll use Root as an example. You're an insurance carrier using telematics, like the coverage at the time, they had six classifications for technology companies. One of them was still CD manufacturing. So like it just wasn't there.
Okay.
um, yeah. And then, look, we were also investors in Open Door and Ladder Life and these other companies that were taking vertically integrated
Yeah.
approaches to financial services. So I really was a big believer at the time in vertical integration. Capital was cheap and abundant. It was the right moment in time to build that business. And also like I got to see the SVB business model where they had insane market share in the innovation economy. They were something like 70% market share back in the day,
Yeah.
for venture-backed companies. And so, like, all right, if we were to build the SVB for insurance, vertically integrated, what would it look like? And I remember talking to Nick. This would have been late 2017, early 2018, and we were like, let's just go build it ourselves. And so we incubated it between Ribbit, SVB. I was really fortunate to be spending time with SVB CEO at the time on some of these fundraising trips, and he was close with Mickey, and so it just all kind of came together. And I just felt like I was in the right place at the right time. And
Well, you put
yeah,
yourself there. Like it always struck me, having followed your story and Vouch's story for years. You were really at the nexus of like all the stuff you needed to pull this off. Like you had the SVB relationship to be able to even contemplate vertical integration. Like if we wanted to do that at ClearCover, like I was gonna have to make some phone calls to figure out, like I wasn't coming from Toyota or Carvana, like it just didn't have it. You had the capital connections, you had the insurance expertise. Like in many ways, you were set up to do this better than anyone who could have tried at that moment.
look, I think it's better to be lucky than good a lot of time. And like I was very lucky to be in the right rooms at the right time. Um, and look, to this day, I tell folks internally all the time, like, I think the stars have aligned in my life. Like everything I've done in my life has kind of led to this. To your point, like I couldn't have been more lucky in those things, and I just feel like I'm doing my life's work.
All right, so you start Vouch, and it was all crazy easy. Nothing happened. S-
Y- You know, in the early days, kind of.
eh,
And here's what I mean by that. So first of all, like I was clearly, look, I was what 27 at the time, and just a young guy with a lot of ideas and a lot of energy. But if we're going to go build a full stack carrier, like I need someone with gravitas around the table. And so Nick introduced me to Sam, my co-founder. He had just gotten off of Funding Circle, which was in the process of going public. Sam's a very legitimate, impressive guy. Like on paper, we're both like, oh, like, finance BD guys, but like we couldn't be more different. He is the
hmm,
buttoned up, sophisticated, pragmatic one, been there, done that. And Knew we needed a lot of capital to go do this, so raised 25 million from SVB, Ribbit, and YC out of the gate. And then we gave ourselves a year. So we started in summer of 2018. Actually, funny enough, I was spending a bunch of time in Wisconsin that summer because my aunt had a lake house up on Lake Minocqua, and
Amazing.
yep, she had. It was actually very. I mean, look, this is a sad personal note, but like she had stage 4 lung cancer, and I got to go spend a month between SVB and Vouch just like with her,
Good
and
for you.
it was really special. We'll talk about some other stuff where that's relevant later in the conversation, I think. But so anyways, we start working on it full time in August 2018, and said we're gonna give ourselves a year to go launch and go through YC. We end up demo day was August 19th, 2019, and that was also the day we sold our first policies. It was a little crazy. And so we ended up working with MRDP, the Munich Re Digital Partners at the
Yeah.
time, to get this thing
Yeah.
off the ground. As you know, insurance is regulated state by state. So we picked Utah. It is a file and use state. So we have like a clear path to launch. And there's a really healthy venture ecosystem there. So like if you analyze file and use states with venture capital activity, it was like the Caitlin Clark, like on the chart off to the right, like very clear, obvious choice.
Okay.
And so I spent like 6 months just camped out in Utah, like staying at a Hampton Inn, going door to door at co-working spaces. And TaxBit was actually our first client. So funny enough, like
Selling. You're out there selling,
I'm just out there
recruiting
selling, like,
startups.
hey
Yeah.
guys, I've got this insurance company that there's no website. You can eventually you could like put a password in and get behind the password to see the website, right? But like you just got to trust me that we're legit. I promise. And so we end up, signing up our first early customers there, and is like figuring out working through a lot of bugs and like fighting and clawing to find product market fit. I remember the first week or two we sold like 10 policies, and I'm like, oh yeah, this thing's cranking, like we're gonna crush it. And then like week 3 or week 4 we sold 0. Like, oh fuck. And so sorry, pardon my French.
No, that's fine
And
on this podcast.
and so I remember we all looked around internally and like really doubled down on, all right, we got to go make this thing work. Because at the time, the whole thesis was we're going to be very partner channel driven, right? We had SVB, we had YC. I'm working with a bunch of venture funds in Utah and like lawyers and real estate. We're going to be very partner driven. But I didn't realize until a few weeks in, like the partners are only going to send you leads if they see that like clients really love what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you really had to go get those early customers yourself to generate the momentum.
Mm-hmm.
So then you fast forward, we're live in a handful of states now. It's March 2020, and like COVID happens, and so hiring freeze. But at the same time, the last meeting I had before COVID was with this guy Ashraf Labella, who's a longtime friend, who ran startup banking at SVB, and we agreed to this big partnership or like mechanics of the partnership that were real game changers for us. So like that went live, Brex went live. And then as part of COVID, I started having VCs reach out like, hey, can you make sure all my portfolio companies have D&O?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this confluence of factors, product market fit, just all happened at the same time in like March, April 2020. And it just took off.
Wow.
And then, of course, we spent all 2020 just like scrambling to hire to keep up with demand. And you fast forward to like September 2021, we get everybody together in person, and all of a sudden we're like 160 people. And that was a crazy ride.
What in that moment you sell 10 policies the first week, and then like somebody turns the spigot off, and like you're not selling anything. What was there, like universal, no big deal, we'll get through it? Was there what pulled the company through that first like shit moment?
It was a little bit of that, like almost like halftime locker room speech, like any given Sunday style. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I
The inches
remember.
we seek. I'm not gonna do a Pacino on the pod, but like that's
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, I just remember David, Miles, our early like go to market crew. We're in a room. We're just like, are we gonna let this happen again? Like, absolutely not. Get in front of the whiteboard and like start working through it. And we never let it happen again. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've had our down weeks, but I think it was a moment where it's like, all right, we're either going to make this happen or we're not. And like,
Yeah.
it's up to the people in this room. So,
And so the business has transformed though. because you're not running that one anymore. You're running a new one. So like take us
Yep.
through the transformation to now the version of Vouch you run.
So we always had this what we call our two napkin strategy: acquire companies early, scale with them as they grow. Right? Stripe, Carta, many others have run this playbook. Once our early clients really started growing, and this happened around kind of late 2021, early 2022, we realized like we really need a brokerage capability. We can no longer just serve these companies directly.
Hmm.
So we had a choice to make. Like we either just become a horizontal SMB player, or we truly live into the vision of being the insurance company for the innovation economy. So we started building out the brokerage capability, ring fence those resources. It's a separate thing. And then you fast forward a few more years and all of a sudden, like those larger accounts are driving, 60, 70% of our revenue. And but those capabilities and those systems and those teams aren't really talking to each other. And at the same time, our biggest competitive vulnerability was competitors telling our clients like, well, hey, Vouch has their own in-house product. Like they're just going to sell that to you. And,
Hmm.
you need a proper broker.
Hmm.
Um, and then look, as much as we tried to say like we set up the incentives and everything to be about like best coverage for the client, doesn't matter. Like we ultimately rebranded the MGA to Corix. Um, Corix is an asset to go create new and innovative products, and we were the first to market with comprehensive Web3 coverage and AI coverage and all this kind of stuff. It still was just this tension, and ultimately, like Corix needed to go find their own distribution through other brokers as well, and
Yeah.
so that level of complexity, that tension, all of it was just mucking up and slowing down the business.
Hmm.
Um, at a moment where capital became a lot more expensive,
Yeah.
where frankly we're starting to this was, you think, 23, 24, 25, right? Like you're seeing what's happening with AI, and I have a personal thesis that I think there's more room to innovate within the distribution layer with AI than there is in the carrier layer, just from the economic perspective, right? Like you got to pay 2/3 of your economics to claims. And so like, meanwhile, brokerages are people and marketing cost. And so you also can just move a lot faster,
Yeah.
right? Like for a lot of reasons. So started a process, gosh, would have been almost 2 years ago now, to sell Corix. We ultimately found a great partner in Hiscox, and that continues to be an ongoing partnership. But it's really allowed us to go all in on building the AI native brokerage, and that's been a lot of fun. We're now in a position where, right there at the precipice of profitability, we're just investing a lot in engineering right now, and extremely well funded and control our own destiny. So for a while there, it was you've been through the ups and downs of it. It was, especially with SVB crashing, all of that, like it was survival mode. And now, we control our own destiny, and I've never had more fun doing what we're doing.
We two questions. When you How did the decision to split the company and sell the MGA go? Was there unanimity? Would some people have to be pulled along? Like how did you go about making a decision that consequential for the business?
Yeah. You know, I got to give my co-founder Sam a ton of credit on this. He ultimately drove that process and that decision. I think it became clear to a lot of folks internally that something wasn't working. I mean, like the business was doing fine. Like we're still growing 20 to 40% a year. Like we were doing fine,
Yeah.
but we weren't doing great. We all knew that there was a lot more potential there, that we were holding ourselves back.
Hmm.
So we explored a few different avenues. It became clear within the leadership team there wasn't a ton of disagreement there. I think there was disagreement on what is the right structure, how do we go about doing this, that kind of stuff. But ultimately, clear we needed to go find a better solution. And then Sam, I mean, from I want to say start to finish, it was like an 8-month process. He just ran it with an insane efficiency, and um, again ended up finding a great partner.
So okay, so now tell me, I've listened to a couple of your prior appearances, and so I did a bit of homework. But AI native brokerage, I think I know, but tell the listeners what that means.
Yeah, so it's funny. I've debated like, what do you call this? Is it AI native, AI enabled? Like, we're not an AI native company, right? We've been doing this for 8 years now. But what does it actually mean? First and foremost, I think it's like, how do you actually operate, right? Let's start with engineering, right? It's a difference between a typical like spec writing, roadmap oriented process
Hmm.
to rapid prototyping, iteration, shipping, launching, really small, tight knit, cross functional teams that can sit alongside each other. That's thing number one. Thing number two is roles are collapsing, right? So we've got product and engineering now doing things like our PMs are shipping their own PRs, our engineers are doing their own prototyping. The most exciting part to me, though, is our go-to-market team members, our producers, our brokers are building a lot of their own stuff. And so like really empowering them with the tools to go build their own workflows and then create the platform, our engineering team to then go extrapolate that and expand it across the business rapidly. Those are the kinds of things that like you just don't see in a typical, even in a digital brokerage like Vouch 5 years ago, you weren't seeing that level of building across the business. So when I say AI native, I first and foremost mean the culture and like how things get done internally.
Yeah.
That's thing
Yeah.
number
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Thing number two is then, all right, well, how does it actually show up in the workflows and for the client? And the workflows themselves, the same, it's still the same jobs to be done, right? You still have to go collect information from the client. You still have to go, prepare a submission to the market, create renewal proposals for the clients. So layer one of all this is to automate a lot of the tasks that humans have done with AI. That's clear and obvious. But thing number three, where I think it starts to get really exciting, is the other counterparties in the market and their workflows getting increasingly agentic. So think about, one, obviously the underwriting side of that, where we're interacting with underwriters. There's obviously API based underwriting today, but most of what we insure really complex businesses. So like there's not as much appetite there for API driven underwriting as there would be for most SMBs.
Uh-huh.
Um, so we can come back to that. On the client side, we're fortunate to work with clients that are using AI to run their businesses increasingly. And so as they delegate more of their work to agents, we've got to create the interface, we've got to create the data for those agents to then interact with on the brokerage side. So I imagine that, that client journey going from you have a discovery call and then you have a proposal call, then you have a decision call to the agents are actually doing most of those first two steps themselves. And you're getting together with your broker, your advisor to make final decisions and build really trusted relationships. And like that piece is actually for a business like ours, I think, often overlooked the role that the human has to play in this. I have a really strong view that like as long as humans are making decisions on the other side of the table, they're going to want to work with other humans they can trust.
So a couple things from that. That's pivoting to the AI section of the discussion. I suppose we found our way there. It has a certain gravity to it, I suppose. Um, the so an AI enabled workflow, like what does that mean in your business? We, for what it's worth, like Dearborn Labs, we're also a very like workflow centric shop in the sense that when we work with a client, what we try not to do is tell them where AI fits into the business, but what we try to do is figure out like how does the work get done with a contemplation of what AI can bring to the work and an
Yep.
understanding of what it's going to be able to do now and in a year from now, et cetera. So like in your business, what's in it without sharing any secret sauce? Like what's an example of a workflow that is better redesigned around AI than it was prior?
Yeah. I'll use renewals as a really good example for this
Okay.
because there are a lot of for large complex accounts, like there are a lot of people involved in the renewal process, right? You go from the client all the way through to the underwriter. You've probably got in a traditional brokerage 12 people involved. At Vouch, you've got at least probably 5 or 6 people involved, and they each have a distinct role to play. But look, we'll be talking more about this soon publicly, but like we've created sort of one master orchestration agent that works across all that every single team member can interact with.
Mm.
And now, look, I think it's really important still for there to be a human in the loop for a lot of reasons. Like, none of this stuff is working so well that you can just automatically like let this
Yeah.
happen and
Yeah.
go to the client.
Well, you can.
Um,
It'll just be a big effing mess. But like, sure,
yeah,
yes,
I'm sure my E&O carrier would love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
You have to be more careful than most. A claim might be bad PR.
that's exactly like we operate in a business where there's real implications if you get it wrong. And
Yeah.
so those are the really obvious things that I think like every broker, every carrier are trying to accomplish right now, right? Like how do you just increase revenue per FTE? How do you increase efficiency? And how do you take, we back to the collapsing of different roles. How do you take something that involves 12 people and bring it down to one, right? Like everybody is trying to do that. So whether it be like renewal prep, submission prep, coverage analysis is a very obvious one in particular in commercial lines. Um, and there's multiple ways you can get that done. I think that the two maybe unique angles that we believe in are one, creating that, industrializing that expertise that has historically lived with the broker and taken many, many years of apprenticeship and repetition for them to develop,
Mm.
can create real differentiation and like superpowers in the business. So like, like very early days in this, but as an example, like our producers ramp about twice as fast as your typical legacy brokerage.
Mm.
There's a lot of different reasons for that. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is back to that, what I'll call agentic distribution. Look, it's really, we're seeing the number of leads we see from answer engines. So think, ChatGPT, Claude, it's like doubling month over month. And like, sure, you've seen personal lines and some other spaces where like, sure, you can sell policies through ChatGPT as an example. But this is a much more considered purchase. And so I think like actually creating for commercial lines what that agentic distribution experience looks like, that's where there's, I think, some real opportunity for differentiation. I know I'm using a lot of like vague words right now, but that's where we see it headed.
In part, I'm a consultant now, so like it's fine. It all that's my job. What For the client, for your clients, how do you like distill all of it to the value they get in the
Hmm.
transaction? Like,
Yeah.
what's the incentive of the client to be like, you know what, Vouch, I choose you.
Well, look, clients ultimately care about working with someone they trust and making it as easy as possible. So we've done a ton of analysis on this, like analyzed thousands and thousands of like gong calls and client interactions and third-party research reports. Um, Clients care about six things in a brokerage. There's six elements of value. There's service, there's expertise, there's the technology experience, there's market access, there's claims handling, and there's one more that's escaping me right now. But the reason it's escaping me is because it's a rounding error. There's three that
Mm.
matter. So if you were to create like a weighted scorecard for this, 40% of it is service. Like, do these people respond to me when I ask for a COI or ask for an endorsement? So speed to service is by far the most important thing. It's about 40% of the value.
Speed to service.
Yes, like specifically speed to service.
Okay.
Thing number two is expertise, and that's like, do they understand my business uniquely? Are they smart about the risk marketplace, that kind of stuff? So do you have a trusted expert that you're working with?
Yeah.
That one is about 20% of the value. And then the last one is the digital experience. And that's changed over the last, call it 10 years, where um, they work with modern tooling in every part of their business. They do not want to be filling out the same information across different PDFs. Like they want a modern technology experience. And so that's about 15% of the value.
Hmm.
So
It
collectively, those three things are 75%.
it's fast. How do you think about this wasn't on my list of questions for you, but I'm bad at scripts anyway. Uh, Those all make sense. How do you interestingly, like there's not like a hard eval for any of them. Like what speed is to one client is maybe not
Yeah.
the same to another, and what experiences to one is not the same to another, and like what technology is good or bad. So like how do you think about benchmarking your performance? Like what the client actually wants from you when the three things they obviously care very deeply about are sort of subjective when you get down to measuring your ability to do them for the client.
Yeah. So, I mean, like at a very high level, you start with NPS, and like, our NPS is in the 70s, and that's great. We'd love for it to be higher.
70 is incredible.
Yeah, it's good. I think from a speed perspective, it's funny. We've had a lot of these conversations about like, well, what's the industry standard like benchmark, and how do we get better? I'm like, look, guys, it with AI, there's no reason that responsiveness number shouldn't be as close to zero as possible. In part because what the client is looking for is not, oh, hey, I need, I just had this contract come in. I need $10 million in cyber coverage. They're not expecting you. I mean, some clients are, but they're not expecting you to turn it around in 10 seconds. What they want is a quick response saying, I'm on it. You can expect next steps in 48 hours, right? So, like, there's no reason that you can't get that level of responsiveness basically down to zero. Now, today,
Hmm.
we still, like, most of the company has AI writing most of their emails, but there's still a human that edits it and sends it out, right? So, like, my goal for the company over the next year is to get that number basically to zero. That's responsiveness. From an expertise perspective, that's exceptionally hard to measure, honestly. Now we've created some really interesting proxies using gong calls because we've got a lot of young career talent. We've had to like really bring up the curve. And so you can create different markers in like call recording to assess like, all right, how effectively does this person actually like understand what they're talking about?
Hmm.
So you can get at some different things, but it's a lot of it is about coaching humans up And it also just comes through in the feedback you get. Like your best people, the people that exhibit that expertise, you get notes from clients all the time about how great
Yeah.
that person is.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Expertise is such an interesting one because it's like judgment is relative to the knowledge of the judger.
Yeah.
You know, like
Oh,
you're like, oh yeah, I've definitely as an investor had this happen to me early, like young insurance investor. You meet with somebody who like really seems to know their shit, and you're like, that person has so much experience. And then my experience level went up, and I was like, oh no,
uh,
that was not
I mean,
experience.
you and I could probably have a few beers reminiscing over how many. I mean, I know personally I made a lot of cringe comments 15 years ago.
I haven't stopped, so
Yeah.
congrats on being
I
able
mean,
to.
same. But just real quick on that point, we see clients all the time using Claude or ChatGPT to be their outsourced insurance advisor.
Fascinating.
They don't know those. I mean, with all due respect to my friend Claude, doesn't know anything about insurance yet. So like, we get they come in with conviction that they've got all this authority over it, and then it's actually a real client management challenge to then coach them around like, hey, actually these are the real answers. So when I talk about agentic distribution, we want to create the what's the word I'm looking for here, the primary source that every agent defaults to working with to actually give their clients smart answers on what they need to know about commercial insurance.
It's so fascinating. It's like a Keynesian beauty contest. Like you basically have to start to understand what the judge is going to judge on in order to tailor your expertise. Because if your client's going to ask Claude if your advice
Yep.
is good, in some ways, like your incentive is to make sure Claude agrees with your recommendation as much as
Yep.
it is to make a recommendation that's like that is objectively expert.
That's right.
It is a fascinating trade off. What on the speed side would your clients? Because you mentioned earlier human interaction is important. I tend to agree. Given that they care so much about speed, though, would your client trade off not talking to a human to get answers to their question, all of their questions instantly?
So I think it depends on the interaction. So if they're looking to make what they consider to be an expensive purchase decision, or if they've got a really important contract on the line, they know they've got to get the requirements right. Um, at least 50% of the time, they want to talk to someone they can trust. So this was a thing at Nationwide where there are these two urban legends. One was there was a board deck in the late 90s that called the internet a fad. They were slow to invest in the internet. You saw that play out. And the second was they'd run a survey every year of their customers that said about 50% of people always want to work with a human agent no matter what. We started Vouch. I was like, we serve tech founders. Like, I got to be able to move that number. Turns out to this day, even for like a $200 bot policy, about 50% of clients want to talk to a human.
Why is that behaviorally? What's your guess as to why that exists?
I mean, this is a really, I don't know, amateur answer. It is trust. Like people have evolved to trust other people. And it's
They
like,
just want to be
even
told it's okay,
they just want to be
right?
told, it's like, oh, you have a license, you have all these credentials behind your name. Like clearly you know what you're talking about. Great. I I do think that's going to start to evolve as people start to. I mean, look, I was just reading yet another story this morning about like the AI boyfriend, right? Like that's a people are going to start interacting with AI as if it were human. So I do think that's going to evolve. How that ratio moves, not totally clear to me yet.
It'll be very interesting to see. I agree with you. I think this like human in the loop when it comes to like I want to be reassured in a choice that I'm making is really about trust. And I think the underlying implication is that at this point we just don't trust the robot as much as we trust another human. In many cases, that's objectively a poor choice because the human is like gonna not actually be as good at giving you advice or giving you judgment as the robot will be. In some cases, that's not true, but in some case, like in other arenas, maybe
Yep.
not insurance, like you actually may be better off trusting the robot. But like societally, we're just not quite to the point where most people are willing to say like the robot is the expert and I should trust their judgment more.
Totally. I mean, here's a good example, right? Like I trust my Tesla to drive me 85% of the time better than I trust myself to drive. Now pulling into the parking lot or like, my kids playing in the driveway and I'm
Right.
pulling up, like I'm taking over. But,
Yeah.
and I think that's true back to that, like highly considered important decision. Yeah. Ultimately they want to have a conversation.
It's odd what we'll trust it for too, because you'll have it drive you and your family around, no problem. But at the same time, I'm sure you could point to interactions you've had with Claude or ChatGPT, which have much lower stakes, where you're like, no, 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 no. Like
Yep.
I don't trust that you've got this correct. It is that evolution of trust in the machine will be something to watch in the next coming years, because the machines are only getting smarter, but our ability to trust them has to keep pace with that, and those are different curves.
Absolutely. As we could spend a whole hour talking about that.
All right. So, speaking of a whole hour, you've given me lots of time. I want to get to the quick fire session here, so you can go run your amazing business and not waste all your time talking to me. Um, the So the first question is always I ask the guests to share like a quote or an aphorism or something that's meaningful to them. Uh, what you gave me back is awesome. And I won't spoil the like where you got it from. I'm just going to read it and then you tell us the story around it. But the quote you gave me is, discipline is freedom for the happy warrior. So where does that come from?
So it's a Jocko Willink thing, and the reason I even went down that path. So back to my aunt that I spent the summer of 2018 with. Um, my whole family, my brothers, both very entrepreneurial. My dad, obviously, but we're all very ADD, like undisciplined, all over the place. But that my aunt was the first person in my family to really go out in the world and like do something really incredible beyond outside of Ohio's borders. And so she was like COO of a public oil company. She was running these ultra marathons. Like she was the first flywheel instructor in New York. Like she was a badass.
Wow, amazing.
The stage 4 lung cancer thing was just out of the blue. And but I lived with her for 6 months while I was doing that co-op with Unilever, and she would get me up at 5 a.m. every day to go running. I ran my first like half marathon with her that summer. Like she taught me discipline.
Hmm.
And without her, who knows where I'd be. And I think that, but ultimately I had to end up building that discipline myself. And I've got this habit. I don't know where my notebook's at here. I sit in the sauna after the gym every morning and like write out my kind of goals for the day, reflect on things, and every morning I write that quote at the top of the notebook as a reminder that when I stick to my habits every day, it gives me the freedom to go be my creative self and go pursue all these big ideas. But if I don't stick to my habits, I'm making life worse for everybody else and not showing up as my best self. Like it's a downward spiral. So you got to start with those habits, and that discipline creates the freedom to go be your best self.
That's what an amazing woman, and it sounds like she had a lasting impact on how you've run your business and your life really since
Yeah,
she shared that with you. What a great
yeah.
story. Okay, two. Uh, we talked a lot about your background and what you've been through. So, advice you'd give yourself at the very beginning. Let's go. Before you walk into Nationwide, before it all, you start the path that leads you to this place. Like, what is the advice you'd give to younger Travis?
Oh man. You know the old like Kool-Aid Man commercials where he would just barge through the wall? Just
Only through Family Guy because of
yeah,
the,
yeah,
but
yep,
like I
same.
was a '90s kid, I suppose. So I saw him in real life, but Family
Yep.
Guy is more salient.
That Kool-Aid Man energy takes you a long way. Like just go put yourself in the room and make it happen, and like you'll be surprised. And I think, I could have done 20% more of
Kool-Aid Man energy goes a long way. I might start writing that in my notebook in the morning. I
that.
like that. That's a good one. All right. What is a contrarian belief you have about how AI actually gets adopted in our
I was
industry?
reflecting on this one. I'm not totally sure what the consensus is today to even be contrarian about.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, there's a lot
Like
that's in flux right now.
I don't know. I guess maybe one architectural choice that we've made that I think might be a little contrarian is having a stable system of record. So like we built our brokerage operating system on top of Salesforce. Like we didn't think it would make our beer taste better to go recreate that and then have to maintain it.
Hmm.
Um, but then creating sort of one agent to rule them all that all of our teams can work with, and then ultimately our clients can work with. So I don't know how other folks are doing it, but that feels maybe a little contrarian to how some folks are.
Interesting. All right, man. You've given us so much of your time. You've given me a lot of it over the years, and more so today. So, congrats on all the success. I think watching your growth and the evolution of Vouch and kind of the new form of the business, which I'm sure will be wildly successful, given your track record and your discipline and all that Kool Aid Man energy that you bring to
Well, look,
to the table each
we have
day.
not spent enough time together over the last few years, so hopefully over beers here sometime soon I can get more of the latest on you, my friend.
we can figure out what that bar was in the Bay Area and
I
go
remember
like
the Dutch Goose. That's what
the
it was.
Dutch goose. I ducked something. I was in the wrong family of billed creature, but yes, Dutch goose.
All
I love
right.
it.
Till next
Travis,
time, my friend.
thank you, man.
See you, brother.